Hey friends, how you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chav Zayin, Daf 27 of Masechta Ksubis. Friends, well, what can you guys tell me about Daf Chav Zayin of Masechta Ksubis? It talks about what happens in like a ward or a siege or whatever. Alright. So says the Mishnah. We're going to start in Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph about halfway into the Amud at the Mishnah. Irshak Shua Karkum. So you have a city, and the city was captured by Nudniks. No, that's not true. There was a siege around the city. All right. Well, if there's a siege around the city, so then if there are any kohanos in the city, so they cannot, unfortunately, remain with their husbands because the assumption would be that they were raped, and then they can't be with their Kohen husbands. But if there are witnesses, whether the witness can even be a slave or a maidservant, well, then they can't. This witness can be believed. And if the witness says that she was not violated, so then she could remain with her husband. But she's not believed to testify about herself. It would have to be somebody else testifying on her account for her, about her. Says the Gemara, but one second, we have a contradiction. That if you have some soldiers and stuff, and they come to the city, B'shas shulim, if it's during a peaceful time, so chavios psuchis, if you have barrels of wine that are open, asuris, so you can't drink them. Stumis mutaris, but if they are closed, then they are permitted. Let's go back there for a second. B'shas milchame, at a time in wartime, elvelu mutaros, then everything is permitted. Vishem pnai lenasech, because there's no time to libate. So, what are we talking about? Who can explain this sugya? So we're talking about Yein Nesech. Stam Yeinam, Yein Nesech. Well, I guess Yein Nesech. Mistama Yein Nesech, I guess. So you have barrels of wine, okay? Now, the concern was that if a idolater or a non-Yid interacts with wine, so we have to be concerned that maybe they used it for idolatrous reasons. And therefore, if you have these non-Jewish soldiers who are coming to the city, so we say if it's a peaceful time, so if they come into your cellar, so then any barrels that are open, we have to be concerned that maybe they used it for idolatrous purposes, but any barrels that are closed, you can assume they did not use for idolatrous purposes because the barrels are closed, they weren't used. Now, if it's a time of war, so we say even the open barrels are okay, are kosher, because they're busy fighting, so they don't have time to libate for their idols. So during a wartime when they're busy like warring, so then whether the barrels are open, whether they're closed, they're kosher and they could do their war. We'll drink our wine. Friends, do you like wine, guys? You like wine, right? Of course. Why not? Why not? Why not? Wine is good. Wine is good. You just you drink it and you drink it, and if you don't like it, you complain about it. If you don't like about it, you just don't drink it. That's the thing. If I don't like wine, I just don't drink it. But then the problem is, you don't drink the wine, and then people ask questions, why aren't you drinking the wine, It's not my taste. Let's go weiter. So, what's the shaila? The shaila is that apparently if it's a wartime, so the soldiers don't have time to be doing their avodah zarah whiny stuff. And therefore, the question is, well, if they don't have the time to do their avodah zarah whiny stuff, then they also don't have the time to rape and pillage. And therefore, why are we assuming that any of the that the wives have been violated if apparently they're busy fighting. Amr of Mari livol yesh pnai, v'nasechin pnai. Look, it's priorities. They have time to rape and pillage. They don't have time though to do the religious stuff. Okay. Well, okay. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Elazar Mishmei Chizkiah Amar says Rabbi Yitzchak bar Elazar in the name of Chizkiah. Kan b'charkom shel osa malchus, kan b'charkom shel malchus acheres. Excuse me, are people making noise? I'm very sensitive to noise, Hopefully not. Kan b'charkom shel osa malchus, kan b'charkom shel malchus acheres. So, says Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar in the name of Chizkiah, that alternatively you can explain that, well, it depends. It depends. If well, there's a lot of noise going on here. I really wish that there wasn't. If it's sort of soldiers from that kingship, so then you don't have to worry about raping and pillaging. But if it's from a different kingship, then you do. So now, what does that mean? Why would your own kingship be sieging you? So interestingly enough, there's a lot of movement going on upstairs. As I expressed and whined about a second ago, I really wish that there wasn't. Excuse me, 1 second. I'm gonna wait until this noise chills out a bit. Okay, hopefully people have a little bit chilled out a little bit. So I mean, I feel like you can kind of think about it in the context of some of the stuff that's happening in the world today. I mean, obviously politics aren't my thing. Really, the point here is to conceptualize it. But with regard to the special military operation that's kind of happening, so conceptually, again, I'm not getting into the specifics about what's happening. The idea is to understand the sugya of Gemara. Now, conceptually, there's this argument from one of the sides that from the bigger side. So let's call it the bigger side and the smaller side. So the bigger side is arguing the smaller side is part of them, and they just kind of want to bring them into their umbrella. So they're not, in theory, in principle, technically, looking to kill and rape and pillage. Why conceptually, why would you do that to people that you're trying to argue are your brethren and part of you, that you want to sort of annex and make part of, and bring them all back to mother big country? And therefore, okay, I think that's probably enough. The point has been made. Okay, let's move on. So in the context of our Gemara, so in the context of our Gemara, no, okay. In the context of our Gemara, the idea being that there's two kinds of ways that you could think about why people would be fighting, right? So there's because they're enemies and they just want to kill each other and rape and pillage. But the other reason might be that you have one country that feels that the other country should really just join together with them and they want to be friendly. And so, so now, if that being the case, so then you don't need to worry about, raping and pillaging. But, so that's what, did I just lose my place? So that's what, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar Mishmei Chizkiah is arguing, that, if it's sort of the situation where they're trying to be friendly and try to show that they're cool and everything, so then, you don't need to worry about, sort of wine and raping and pillaging. But, if it's more enemies kind of stuff, well then you do. Okie dokie. Fine. So malchus kan b'charkom shel malchus acheres shel osa malchus nami yefshe delo orak chad minayu. But even if you have sort of a friendly neighborly war, still there might be some bad apples. That even if the policy is to show that you're friendly and cool, you might have a few bad apples that rape and pillage. So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Kishemishmaros Ro so. Yeah, but the army, they have like officers that are making sure that there's no raping and pillaging. But even the officers, they might fall asleep. So Amar Reb Levi Kigon de Mahadar Lo Lamata Shushilta Bechalba Vigavoza Ve'avoza. Well, it's like where they have around sort of the city, like chains and dogs and barbed wire and all sorts of friendly things, so that if anybody tries to sneak in or out, so it'll be a whole balagan, and that way they know that none of their soldiers are going to be getting in to the city to rape and pillage, because then all the dogs would get excited and the geese, and it would be a whole balagan. Says Rabbi Bar Zavda that there's a machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya and the rabbis. Chadomer kam b'chakom shalosa malchus kam b'chakom shel malchus acheres v'lo kashele v'lo midi. So one of them said that it depends. If it's sort of a friendly war, so then you don't need to worry about raping and pillaging. But if it's a war among enemies, so then a war between enemies, then you have to worry about it. Fine. And he's not concerned with all these questions, but that, like, even in a friendly war, maybe you might have a bad apple. And then the other opinion was that, well, they had all these questions, what about the bad apple, and that kind of stuff, so they had to then mention that, well, there's like barbed wire and dogs and geese and chains and all sorts of balagan making things to prevent people from making a balagan. Okay. Amar Vidi bar Oven, Amar Yitzchak bar Asiyan. Yesh sham machboa achas matzelas al hakohanos kulan. That if there's one hiding place, well then it saves all of the priestesses. So meaning if there was a place where they could theoretically hide, well then that's it. You can assume that they hid and that nobody. That there was no problems. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked the question, what if that hiding spot was only enough to fit one person? Do we say, well, since there was a hiding spot that was able to hide one woman, so therefore we can assume that each woman was that one woman, and therefore every Kohenes could remain married to her Kohen husband. Or maybe we don't say that. Right? Maybe we don't say that we can assume that each woman was that woman, and the numbers indicate that, being that there was only enough of a hiding, there was only the hiding spot would only hide one person. Chances are that this woman was not that one person. So umashna mishnei shvilin. So, for the Gemara, well, is this any different than the sugya of the two paths? Echad Tomi v'echad Tor. So you have two paths. Let's call them the Ruvain path and the Shimon path. V'halach be'echad mein v'asa tyrus. And v'chaver v'halach b'sheni v'asa tyrus. So you have two paths. Path Shimon, path Ruvain, and path Shimon. And then Ruvain the person and Shimon the person. That's nice. Ruvain the path and Shimon the path, and Ruvain the person and Shimon the person. So now one of the paths is Tameh and one of the paths is Tahor. Now Ruvain the person goes down Ruvain the path, and Shimon the person goes down Shimon the path. And so Memele, one of them went down the Tameh path, and he himself now is Tameh. So where am I? So where am I? So Ruvain the person went down Ruvain the path, and Shimon the person went down Shimon the path, and one of the paths is Tameh, which means that Memele, either Ruvain or Shimon is Tameh. One of them has to be Tameh. We just don't know which one, because we don't know which path is Tameh. And they both interacted with Truma, with Tyrus. And the question is, what's the status of this Truma? Is it Tameh or Tahor? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, says Rabbi Yehuda, Im nishal ze b'fnei atzmo v'ze b'fnei atzmo, Tahoris. that if each one asks individually, then they are both tahor. Shneim ka'achas tmeis. But if they ask together, then they are tmeis. Right? So says Rabbi Yehuda, if Reuven the person comes and says, look, what do I do? Am I tamei or tahor? We say, look, I don't know, 50-50 chance. So we can assume that, right? Sofik tamei b'rshus harabim, right? This was in a public space, right? Reuven the path and Shimon the path are in a public area. So this is Sofik Tuma B'Shus HaRabim, right? Maybe you went down the Tamei path, maybe you went down the Tahor path. We say Reuven the person. We don't know if you're Tamei or Tahor. So Sofik Tuma B'Shus HaRabim, when you have a doubt about in a matter of Tuma in the public domain, so Tahor, Sveiko Tahor, you can assume that he's Tahor. So Reuven the person is Tahor. Now Shimon comes to us and says, no, what am I? You say, well, Shimon, I don't know. Maybe you went down the Tahor path. Maybe you went down the Tamei path. We don't really know. It's a suffix. Suffix Tuma B'Shus HaRabim Sveiko Tahor. So you're pure. So as long as Reuven comes, right, Reuven and Shimon ask separately, so then we could tell each of them individually that we don't know what their status is, and therefore you can assume that they are Tahor, even though obviously one of them is Tamei, but since each one individually is a suffix, so we can say that they're each Tamei, but Shneim Ka'achas Tameos. But if they come together and say, what do we do? Well, then obviously one of them is Tamei, and we don't know which one, so therefore we have to assume that, we can't say you're both Tahor, because that's obviously not true. So therefore we say, look, one of you are Tamei, we don't know which one, so we have to treat both of you as though you're Tamei. Rabbi Yossi Omer says, Rabbi Yossi ben kach uven kach Tamein. Rabbi Yossi says, look, even if they come separately, we can't say that both of them are Tahor. So they're both Tamei. Now, v'omer Rav v'tem Rabbi Yochanan b'vas achas divrei hakol Tamein b'ozeh achas divrei hakol Torin. So now, some say Rabbi Yochanan clarifies that actually, look, if Reuven came on his own and then Shimon came on his own, so we could tell both of them that they are Tahor. Everybody agrees on that. And also, if Reuven and Shimon came before us together, also there, everyone agrees that they're both Tamei. No nechliku ella, where this machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi is bivali shal olav val chavero. When Reuven comes by himself to ask about himself, but also to ask about Shimon. So he's not coming with Shimon, but he is asking, what about Shimon oichet? So Rabbi Yossi treats it as though it's bebas achas, as though they came together, and therefore they're both tamei. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda treats it as though they came separately, and therefore they're both tahor. V'chanami came desharu lehu lechulu kivas achas domi. And here also, let's say that with regard to all of these women, that maybe each one was the one who hid in that space, so we have to treat it, so Rabbi Yossi would say that in the case of the two paths, they're both tamei, and generally we pass like Rabbi Yossi. So we would have to say here as well that we're going to treat this situation as if all of the women are together, and therefore they're all tamei. Which the Gemara says not so fast. When it comes to the two paths, there was certainly Tuma on one of the paths. There's no doubt about it. One of them is certainly Tamei. And therefore, when he comes when Reuven the person comes and asks about him and his friend Shimon, so Memela, one of them is Tamei, so we say that they're both Tamei. However, when it comes to this situation with the war in the city, so then we don't necessarily know that there was any raping and pillaging that happened at all, right? So therefore, the combination between, being able to say that, well, one person was able to hide there and we don't know which one it was, and the fact that we don't necessarily know that anybody got raped or pillaged at all, so therefore we want to argue that actually it's different, and you can say in this case that everybody is, that all these women are tahor, as long as there was a hiding spot that could hide one person. But Rav Ashi asks a kasha. If so there was a siege, and then a woman says, "Look, I didn't hide, but I'm also tahor, right? I didn't hide, but I'm also tahor. Mahu, what's the halacha? Mi aminon mali l'shakar. Do we say, why should she lie, right? Meaning if she was going to lie, then she just would have said that she hid. She's coming to us and saying, look, I'm being honest, I didn't hide. But I'm also tahor. I wasn't, raped. So do we say, look, Mali l'shakar? Why should she lie about being raped or not? She's already admitting that she didn't hide. If she was lying, she would just say that she hid. Or maybe we don't say that. Why is this any different than that story? What story? Well, Reuven rented out his donkey to his friend Shimon. And Reuven says to Shimon, look, do me a favor. Well, not do me a favor, but look, here's the rules. You don't walk on the Nahar Pakud road, because, by way of Nahar Pakud, because there's water there, and it's not good for the donkey. Instead, take the Narish path, because there's no water there. And then this fellow, sure enough, he took the Nahar Pakud path where there's water. And the donkey died. Also the Kamid Raveh. And then they came before Ravis. Now what do? Reuven specifically told Shimon, don't go down the right, don't go by way of Nahar Pakud, because there's water and it's bad for the donkey. Sure enough, he went down the Nahar Pakud way, and the donkey died. They came before Rav Amarle, and Shimon says, in B'orcha the Nahar Pakud Azli, yes, I took the Nahar Pakud route, mihu lo havu mayo, but there wasn't any water there. Omer Rabbis, and it says Rabbi, Mali l'shakar. And Rabbi says, look, why should he lie? If Shimon wanted to be dishonest, he could have just said, I took the Narish path and it died on the Narish path. I did exactly what you told me to do. I didn't do anything wrong. It's not my fault. But he didn't say that. He was straightforward. He said, look, I took the Nahar Pakud path, but there was no water. So do we say that from the fact that he was being forthcoming, honest, regarding the fact that he took the Nahar Pakud path, says Rabbi, we should also believe him that there was also no water over there, even though there generally is water. And Abaye says to Rabbi, Mali l'shakar b'makom edim lo amrinun. Abaye says to Rabbi, look, Rabbi, we can't say Mali l'shakar in a place where there's witnesses. Who are the witnesses? The witnesses are everybody. Everybody knows that the Nahar Pakud route has water, which is why Reuven said don't go that way, because there's water. Everybody knows that there's water on the Nahar Pakud route. And therefore we can't just say, well, Shimon was being honest by the fact that he went the Nahar Pakud route. It's very nice that he's honest, but we have to assume that there was water there. And Reuven Dafka told him, don't take that route because there's water and it's bad for the donkey, and he took it anyways. And even though he's saying yes, and even though he's admitting that he took the Nahar Pakud route, but he's right, and then he was saying that there was no water there. We can't trust him that there was no water because, right, we can testify that there, generally speaking, there is water on the Nahar Pakud route, and therefore Mali l'shakar b'makom edim lo amrinun. We can't say, but he was being honest regarding the Nahar Pakud route when, along with that comes the fact that we know that Nahar Pakud route generally has water, and we can't just trust him that there was no water when we pretty much, right, when we know that there is water in the Nahar Pakud route. And therefore, we want to say that in this case as well, we shouldn't be able to say Mali l'shakar, but then we say Ochi ashta osum vada ika edim de ika maya. But the thing is that by the water and the donkey and the Nahar Pakud, we definitely have witnesses that there's always water on that route. Hachi vada itmei chashoshu uvmakum chashoshu amrinu. But in this case of the raping and the pillaging in the city and the siege, so right, it's not certain that these soldiers were raping and pillaging. Chashoshu, it's a suspicion. Uvmakum chashoshu amrinun, and we can say Mali l'shakar when it's just a suspicion, not actual testimony. And therefore, if she's being forthcoming and saying, "Look, I didn't hide, but I also was not violated," so we can trust her, because we'll say Mali l'shakar. If she wanted to lie, she would just say that she hid, but she was being honest that she didn't hide. Therefore, we can also assume that she's being honest that she was not violated. Now says the Gemara, Im yesh edim afilu eved va'afilu shivcha ne'emonin that if there are witnesses, even if the witness is a slave or a maidservant, they are believed, right? So so we said that, if there's this siege around the city, so then all of the kohanos in the city cannot be with their Kohen husbands anymore. So then we said, but if there was a witness, even if that witness is a slave or a maidservant, and the witness says that, she's tahora, so we can believe the witness. Vafilu shifcha dida mehemna. Now, does this mean that even her maidservant would be believed? That if her maidservant said that she is tahora, would that maidservant be believed? But we have a contradiction. No, tisyachid imo ela al pi edim. If you have a fellow, he's on his deathbed, and he writes for his wife a bill of divorce, so that upon his death she would be divorced from the time that the bill of divorce was written, and therefore and thereby she wouldn't have to do yibum or chalitza, as we know from Masechta Yevamos how challenging that could be. So he writes her a divorce document, and he says that look, upon my death, this is going to be a divorce document retroactively, and then you bypass yibum and chalitza. So tisyachid imo, so from that point on, she cannot be secluded with him, because then you have to be concerned about what's called a get yoshin. A get yoshin in old get is when he writes a get, but then afterwards there's yichud, which means that the initial get, which was written before they were then together, essentially becomes unusable, because after writing the get, they were then secluded together. So if this fellow on his deathbed writes this divorce document, then they cannot be secluded together anymore. Ella alpi edim, unless there are witnesses there to testify that they didn't have intercourse. Vafilu alpi eved, vafilu alpi shifcha, and this witness can even be an eved or a shifcha, chutz mi shifcha so, with the exception being her shifcha, mipnei shaliba gas b'shifcha so, because she feels comfortable with her shifcha, with her maidservant, and she may have relations with her husband even in her presence, and therefore we cannot trust the shifcha to testify that she is really tahor. So therefore, we see that in this context we cannot rely upon the shifcha. So then, the Gemara is asking that then maybe we should assume that the same would be the case by this siege. That if her shifcha testifies that she's tahora, maybe that is insufficient. Amar Papi b'shvuye kelu. So Papi says, a concept that we've been seeing a few times recently, that by a captive we are lenient. And therefore, this is a situation of a siege, and and the question is she tahora or tmeya? So we're lenient over here to say that we can rely upon her shifcha to say that she is tahora. Rav Pape Omar says, Rav Pape, ha b'shifcha dida, ha b'shifcha didei. So Rav Pape says, well, it depends if it's her maidservant or his maidservant. His maidservant would be believed. Her maidservant would not be believed. V'shivcha dida lo mehemna. 1 second. Her maidservant is not believed. Hakatani ein odem meir al atzmo. The Mishnah had said that a woman cannot testify about herself. Hashivcha dida mehemna, implying that her shifcha would be believed, right? She can't testify about herself, but her shifcha can testify about her. Shifcha sonami ka'atzma damit, which the Gemara says, no, shifchasa is ka'atzma, right? Her shifcha is basically like her. We treat her in the same way that we treat her shifcha, with the same status as we treat her, and we cannot rely upon the shifcha. And there's more noise now. We cannot rely upon we cannot rely upon her own shifcha. That's the opinion of Rav Pape. Rav Ashi Omer says, Rav Ashi, ha v'ha b'shifcha dida. No, it's all talking about her shifcha. And right, we're saying in our Mishnah that we can rely upon the shifcha in the context of the siege. We cannot rely upon her shifcha in the context of the fellow on his deathbed. V'shifcha mechzo chaza v'shoska. And the thing is, a maidservant will see whatever she sees, but then she'll keep quiet. And therefore, when it comes to the bill of divorce, if the maidservant keeps quiet, well then that's going to be a problem, right? Because in the event that he wrote her a bill of divorce and then afterwards they had relations together and the maidservant was there and witnessed it but isn't saying anything, well, if she's not saying anything, then we're going to assume that the couple was already divorced and she's not going to do even more chalitza. But the problem is that it was a get yashrim, which is inadmissible because they had relations, but the shifcha isn't going to say anything, so there it's a problem. But hacha d'shtikasa osarta mehemna. But in this case, where if her maidservant keeps quiet, she will be asura, right? By default, in this case, we say that if there was a siege, then all of the kohanos are asuras to her husband, and if the shifcha keeps quiet, well then we're going to assume that her maidservant is asura. So hashtana zeh. And by her going against her nature and speaking up and saying no, she's tehora, she's going against her nature, and therefore we can trust her that if she's saying that her sort of master is tehora, then we can believe that she is really tehora. Hashtanami asyu mishakra. But one second, shouldn't we be concerned that here also she's lying, right? That maybe she's being untruthful when she says that her sort of master is tehora. No, she's not going to sort of do two things. She's not going to sort of witness her getting violated and keep quiet. / also not only that, but just keep say the exact opposite. We're not concerned about that, and therefore, if she's coming and saying that she's, if the shifcha is saying that she's tahora, so we can believe her. Kiyad Mari bar Isak, v'amilachono bar Isak. It's like Mari bar Isak. Some taka say it was Chono bar Isak. Also lay Acha mi Beichoza, that Acha mi Beichoza came. Amarle, and he says to Mari bar Isak or Chono bar Isak, Plogli benichsei dab. Abba mi Beichoza shows up and says, let's just choose one name. Mari bar Isak, I am your brother. Our father is dead. I want to take part of the inheritance. Amarle lo yadayin alach. Mari bar Isak says, brother, I have no clue who you are. Also the comment of Chizde. So Acha mi Beichoza came to Rav Chizde. Amarle, Rav Chizde said to him, Shaper kamerlach. Mari bar Isak, he's saying good. He doesn't know who you are. That the pasuk says by Yosef HaTzadik that when his brothers came to Egypt, they didn't recognize him. He recognized them. They didn't recognize him. That when Yosef left his brothers, he didn't yet have a beard. And now when he was the king of Egypt, he had a beard. He had a beard. And they didn't recognize him. So Rav Chizda says to Achim Beichoza, look, Mari bar Isak doesn't know you. He doesn't recognize you. You lived somewhere else for a long time. Now you're coming back and claiming to be his brother and saying you want the inheritance. He's right to say he doesn't know who you are. Get lost. Amalei Zil, I decided the Achvat. So Rav Chizda suggested to Achim Beichoza that why don't you go get witnesses to attest to the fact that you're a family, that you're brothers. Amalei Isli Saide, to which Achim Beichoza says, look, I have witnesses. Umistafinu minei, but I'm scared of Mari bar Isak, the Gavra Alamu, because he's a bully. Amalei Ledide. So Rav Chizda said, oh yeah, Mari bar Isak is a bully? Alright, so he said to Mari bar Isak, Zil Aisinu At. Mari bar Isak, why don't you go and bring witnesses, Delav Achuchu, to prove that Achim Beichoza is not your brother. But otherwise I'm going to assume that he is your brother. Amalei Dino Achi, Hamotzi Mechaver Olav Arayah. So Mari bar Isak says, but one second. Of course we have a principle of Hamotzi Mechaver Olav Arayah, that if one person wants to extract payment from another one, he has to bring the burden of proof is upon him, the one who wants to extract the payment. And therefore, if he's coming to me and claiming to be my brother, and therefore I have to give him the inheritance part of, his share in the inheritance, well then he's going to have to prove that he's the brother, not me to have to prove that he's not the brother. So Amalei, Hachi da inin Allah, to which Rav Chizda says to Mari bar Isak, yes, but this is the way that I'm judging the case, Ulechulu Allah mechavrach, and this is to send a message to you and all of your bullies, all your friends who are bullies, Hashtanami, Also, Meshakar. 1 second. So Rav Chizda says, I'm sending a message to you and your bully friends that you shouldn't be bullying people, and now I'm placing the burden of proof upon you. Hashtanami also Meshakar. But 1 second, don't we have to be concerned that Mari Bar Isak, the bully, is going to what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Chaparan, a bunch of liars. So Tarti lo avde. They're not going to do two things, right? One is to sort of not testify truth, and the other one is to dafka lie. All right. So they're not going to be big nudniks to come and on Mari Bar Yisak, the bully's request, just lie through their teeth. So now it says the Gemara, Lema Kitanoi. Let's say that this question of regarding her shifcha, is she believed or not? So let's say it's a machlokas tanoim. Zo edus ish v'isha, that this is testimony, right, to testify that this woman is tahora. This is testimony that a man can testify about it, a woman can testify about it. Tinok v'tinokes, even young people. Avia v'ima, her father, her mother, v'achia v'achosa, her brother, her sister. Avalo b'no v'ita, but not her son or her daughter. Lo avda v'lo shivchasa, not her slave and not her maidservant. So we see according to this brayso that we cannot trust her maidservant. But we have a different brayso that says everyone is believed to testify, just not her or her husband, implying that we can trust her shifcha. So Rav Papi would Rav Ashi tanoihi. So according to Rav Papi and Rav Ashi, Rav Papi who says that we're lenient when it comes to a shifcha, and according to Rav Ashi who says that there's a distinction between his shifcha who is believed, but her shifcha who is not believed. So clearly then, it is a machlokas tanoim, right? Because we have one brayso saying that it works with her shifcha, and one brayso is saying that it doesn't work with her shifcha. So, therefore, according to Rav Papi, he says, look, we can trust the shifcha because that b'shvuya hekelu. Well, we have a brayso saying that we can't trust the shifcha, so it's machlokas tanoim, right? And according to Rav Ashi, who says that we cannot trust the shifcha, so then what about the brayso that says that you can't trust the shifcha? So it's a machlokas. I'm sorry, I messed up Rav Ashi's opinion. Rav Ashi says that we can trust her in this situation because the default is that if she's quiet, then we won't. Then she would be usher. Now that she's speaking, it kind of makes her permitted. So both according to Rav Ashi and according to Rav Papi, she's permitted in this case. And how do we understand the brayso that says that she's not allowed? So then it's a machlokas tanoim. However, the Rav Papa milema tanoi, but Rav Papa who says that there's a difference between if it's his shifcha or her shifcha. Why is it necessarily machlokas tanoim? Right, we have one brayso saying that we can trust the shifcha, one of them saying we cannot. So just say the one that says you can, it's because it's his shifcha, and the one that says that you cannot, it's because it's her shifcha. So Amalek Rav Papa, so Rav Papa will say to you, Kitanya hahi b'mesicha lifi tuma. B'mesicha lifi tuma. You could say that in the situation where we do believe her, we could say that it is talking about that we believe her because she's just kind of talking mesicha lefituma. She's just kind of like unfiltered babbling. That when Rav Dimi came, he said that Rav Chanan Kartignoa said, there was a story that came from Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Mishtoi. Those who said that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi expressed that there was a story before Rabbi, a fellow who was unfilteredly babbling. He said, that me and my mother were taken captive among the idolaters. I went to draw water, and all I could think about is my mother. And to chop wood, to gather wood, all I could think about is my mother. And Rebbe allowed his mother to be married to a Kohen based on this testimony that he was basically saying that the whole time he was always with her, never left her side, and she always remained tahor. Well, that was Daf Chav Zayin of Masechta Ksubis. So, alright, it was kind of a strange daf. It talked about if there's like a siege going on in the city, so then the Kohanos cannot remain married to their husbands. But along the way, there were some interesting sugyas, though, about the concept of the two paths, right? Can you assume that that if you have two paths and both people went on the tummy path, so if they come one at a time, you can assume that each one's tahor. But if they come together, then we can assume that then we have to assume that they are tameh. We got to the context of mali the shaker, or the concept of mali the shaker. That can we trust that a person is being honest? But we say mali the shaker b'makom edim. We don't necessarily say. And then we talked also about the trustworthiness of a woman's shifcha. Can you trust her? We said that in this case, we can trust her. We gave 3 reasons. We saw the reason of Rav Papi that we can trust her because B'Shvuya Hekelu. We saw the opinion of Rav Papi who says that there is distinction that we cannot trust her shifcha, but we can trust his shifcha, and Rav Ashi who says that in this case, since normally she would kind of keep quiet, which by default would mean that her like mistress, I guess, would be asura, or here by speaking up, she's going against her nature, and Dafka saying that she is tahora, so we can believe her. Friends, that was Daf Chav Zayin of Masechet Ksubis. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.